Hello, I want to welcome everyone to the Power of Our Story. We are a community where veterans, first responders, and all protectors can connect, share their experiences, and heal together. Tonight, I cannot be more thrilled to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, retired Green Beret. And he is here to talk about his book, The Generosity of Scars: How Your Stories of Struggle Can Change Lives, Especially Your Own. And here is what his book looks like. Um, and just to let you know a little bit about him, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann is a retired Green Beret with over 22 years of Army and Special Operations experience around the world. He is also a New York Times bestselling author, actor, and playwright. His play Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret, about the war in Afghanistan, can be found on Amazon Prime. He is the CEO of Rooftop Leadership and the founder of Task Force Pineapple, a nonprofit committed to helping veterans transitioning to civilian life find their voice and tell their stories. Scott trains corporate leaders, business owners, and sales professionals on best practices for authentic influence through storytelling and making deeper human connections. Scott appears frequently on Fox News, CNN, podcasts, and other platforms to speak about building organizational relationships, restoring trust in our communities, and a wide range of national security issues. Scott lives in Florida with his wife, Monty. Scott's ultimate passion is to inspire, teach, and share the power of storytelling from the stage. And Scott, I just want to welcome you tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Sarah. It means a lot to be here. I'm amazed at this community and just what you started and have stayed so true to, and I've told you this before, but what you've initiated and then what this crew has continued to build. I mean, it's a true thriving community around narrative, and I think it's probably the most prolific storytelling community out there for the protectors. And man, that's pretty wild. That's amazing that in just a few years, this community has evolved to this level. And you think about it's like Rich said, I guarantee it saved quite a few lives, and changed even more. So, awesome to be here, and really just looking forward to talking about really with you all about your stories and however I can best play my position for making that happen.
Well, let's do this then. Let's have you share your story and, everything that you're doing. And thank you so much for those kind words. I think that's why our platform loves you so much. It has just been so powerful to hear you share the energy that you bring to everything. The play, a lot of us from this group came to your play. My husband didn't know what to do with me at the play because I just lost it. And 36 years of marriage, and he'd never seen me like that. I was so impacted by your play. So again, it's just an honor to have you. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, and then we'll have a great discussion afterward.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So, I thought about where to start tonight, and I think the place to start is especially with this group and considering the whole wounds to wisdom thing. The journey from struggle to resolution, right? And which is what that beautiful title of that book that you all have put together so aptly represents. And for me, the question that I always like to pose to people, particularly protectors, is what if your ugliest scar could become your most beautiful gift? Like that's the question that I always try to pose. And at the time when my ugliest scar surfaced, that certainly was not what was running through my mind. What was running through my mind was just leaving this earth. I was standing not more than 40 feet from where I'm sitting right now, and I was in my bedroom closet, and I had a pistol under my chin and no intention of coming out of that closet. And I can, to this day, I can still remember it, feel it, everything about it. I had gone from, I can remember standing there in the darkness with my just actually pretty calm, just trying to work myself up to that final moment of checking out. And what was running through my mind, I remember, was that how in the hell how had I gone from being this high performing Green Beret, a guy that had, since he was 14 years old, wanted to be a special forces soldier and was able to do it and live a life that really was everything more than I dreamed of in terms of my journey as a Green Beret. I absolutely loved it. I loved even the deployments, but uh, it was really when I came home from all of that and the just how fast everything spiraled for me in 2013 as I retired after almost 23 years in the Army and about 18 of that as a Green Beret. I tell people it was probably 72 hours from taking off my desert boots and putting on the Tampa Bay flip flops that the snakes in my head really started to squirm in a massive way. And I had a really awesome Vietnam veteran SF guy named Dave Phillips. He had warned me about this. He had said, "Watch out for those snakes in the head, man." But I had a plan. I was still married. I had my kids at home. I had a book I was going to write. I had a great job as a contractor. Everything, honestly, I was finally going to go fishing. We had bought a place on the river. Everything that I had deferred for most of my adult life, I was now going to be able to do. And so there was nothing in my way. It was really just nothing but a glide path. But it was everything but that from the time I came home. And part of it was, and I'm very candid about this. I feel like I came home to a country that I just didn't recognize in many ways. The level of, and this was 2013, so to me it's gotten even worse. But the level of division in the country that I had just really not noticed when I was deploying back and forth, but the level of division and distrust in the country, the way that in groups and out groups were, fomenting around the country, I just thought, man, this looks a lot more like Afghanistan than it does, the country I grew up in. And the words from Sebastian Junger in the book Tribe, I didn't read that book until later, but I thought it really, when I look back on it, it really captured how I felt. And, Junger says that most combat veterans are more than willing to die for their country. They just don't know how to live for it. And it's hard to know how to live for a country that's tearing itself apart along every imaginable line. And that's truly what I felt like. It was, I started asking myself hard questions. I'm like, if this is the level of division that's happening here and this is what's going on, what the hell was the point, and a lot of that was just self-induced because I had not dealt with a lot of the post-traumatic stress. I had not dealt with the survivor's guilt and the things that had happened with loss in combat. And so those snakes started squirming as soon as my purpose kind of eroded. And I had enshrouded all of my identity and all of my purpose in being a Green Beret. And I had since I was 14. It's all I knew, and now I wasn't. I was walking around my house in a bathrobe, not having shaved and not showered in a couple of weeks and just existing. My boys, Cody, Cooper, and Braden, were still in high school and junior high school. They would get up and leave the room. If I would walk into the living room, they would get up and leave because they didn't know what version of dad they were going to get. My wife Monty would say to me through whispers, she'd, "Hey, you want to help me wrap Christmas presents?" And I would just, 50-yard stare right past her on a good day. And so we started to grow apart and the level of tension between us started to heighten. And, I can remember one day just sitting on my couch looking at photos on my phone from being on a team and being an SF, and that was kind of what I would revert back to. And I remember looking at this one photo, and it was on a day that we had lost a teammate, a guy that left this world doing what I told him to do, and I just had this like 100-mile stare, off into the distance, and I just remember looking at that face, that stare, thinking, man, that's the look that followed me home. That look did not get turned back into the team room. That look did not get turned back into the Army. I kept that. I took that one with me, and it became my look to my wife when she would ask me things, to my boys when they would try to tell me about their day at school, when I would sit down in front of a potential employer and they'd say, "Tell me how your experience will parlay into our mission here at work." They would get that stare. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, man. And I started to worry that maybe I just wasn't relevant anymore, and that was the hardest thing for me to process, because all of my life, my metric, my number one metric was relevance. As long as I was relevant to what was going on, I felt my cup was full. And now I wasn't, and I wasn't even relevant to my family. And that was the hardest thing to process. And so after a fight over finances, I don't even remember what the details were, but it was a blow up between Monty and me, my wife, and she stormed out of the house and I stormed back to the closet, man. And I hit the go button and that was it. Like, I knew that was going to be it. And, I just remember standing back there in the dark and going back and forth on what would be better. And I heard a door close, the front door. It was my son Cooper, and he had come home early from school with some friends, and I just thought, man, what kind of dad would do that? Like, I can't do that. And so I cleared the weapon and I safed it and I put it up and I came out of the closet doing my best to act like nothing was wrong, and just went about my way. And I never told anybody about it. No one, not my wife, not my kids. I just kept kind of going. And I remember just being, and this was 2015, just kind of in a transition purgatory. It's like I didn't want to live and I couldn't find the strength to die. I just existing like 4 feet off the earth, untethered, And the worst part for me, you guys, was like, I knew that I could be relevant and I knew that I still had things to offer. I was 41, for God's sake. Like, I'd spent my whole life, adult life, teaching and advising people on how to build relationships, how to build connections. That's what Green Berets do. And I was pretty good at it. I had a craft and a science and an art for social capital and interpersonal skills. And I was looking at all the division in the country and I thought, man, like, if ever there was a time for me to put this to work, like, it's now. But every time I would try to get in front of people at this point in my life, I would literally fall apart. My anxiety was so bad. My imposter syndrome was so bad. My sense of self was non-existent. I mean, I had gone from a guy that could get in front of, heads of state and foreign militaries and give instruction in a target language, and now I couldn't stand up in front of veterans and talk about issues like mental health without just literally throwing up. And that was the part for me that was just so debilitating, was that I'm like, if I can't do that, what can I do? Like, seriously, what can I do? And I was fortunate enough. I had a couple of mentors, one in particular, he was not even a veteran, a business owner in Tampa. And he knew that I really wanted to do that I had this acumen for social connection and human connection, and that I really wanted to find a way to teach that. But that I had this debilitating anxiety now. And then, Stephen Pressfield calls it resistance with a capital R. It's basically just self-sabotage. And he said, there's this guy out in California. He's a former NFL football player. His name is Bo. And he was a runt, grew up on a farm in Northern California, and then somehow made it to the NFL, blew his knee out for like the 7th time, and he became an actor, and then he became a playwright, and then he wrote and performed a one-man play that went off Broadway. And now he's a speaker, and he helps people basically who've been through struggle take that struggle and tell their story. And he said, you should go train with him, like, you should go see what that's all about. He's at a speaker event out in California. So I thought, okay, well, hell, I don't have anything to lose at this point. So I went to Monty, and I hadn't even got the words. I was like, hey, babe, there's this thing out in California. She's like, go. And so I did. I flew out there, and I remember, and Troy will probably know what I'm talking about. It wasn't Bo's event. It was another event. It was a big speaker event. And there were probably, I'm not kidding you, I was like 600 people at this event, and it was all about speaking. And everybody there was probably like 22 years old. And I'm like this 41-year-old dad bod dude that's out there, like, what am I even doing here? And everybody in the audience was like, all this rock and roll music. I'm like, holy shit, like, what am I doing here? And I was about to leave, but Bo had not come out yet. And I thought, all right, I'm going to wait and I'm just going to see what this dude's about. So I did. I waited, and he came out on the stage, and I'm not kidding you guys. Like, for me, there was a moment when before I became a Green Beret where I saw a Green Beret that walked into a soda shop in the little town I grew up in. His name was Mark. And I remember just like the moment I saw that dude, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And it was just like that with Bo. Like, as soon as I saw him walk out on the stage, I was like, holy crap. I mean, the way he carried himself, his physicality, the room literally was like breathing in unison, as he was talking. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And what was interesting was, no, it wasn't even, it was beyond interesting. It was so compelling, like I couldn't look away from him. And he was telling a story about one of the worst days of his life. He was telling a story about when he blew his knee out for the 7th time and his whole dream was over. Right? And he was talking about how he was being carried off the field. And he was looking off in the distance, and he said he wasn't even upset about the knee injury because he knew that was coming. But he said he remembered thinking as he's being carried off the field, I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to go to prison because the only thing I know how to do is hurt people. The only thing I know how to do is hit people so hard that you smell smoke. And he said, if I don't find a way to take this TNT inside of me and put it into the world for something good, I'm not going to make it. And man, when I heard that, I was like, holy crap, like that's me. Like that's exactly how I feel. And he went on to talk about how he became an actor and a playwright. And so after the talk was over, I don't really even remember. I just remember like knocking 21-year-olds out of the way to get up to talk to him. And when I did, I was just kind of blabbering, and I kind of told him what I could about my story, and he just looked at me and he said, "I'm going to help you." And he gave me his phone number. And I ended up training with him for like 2 years, like two straight years that I trained with him. And it was really difficult because what he did was he taught me, the real art and science of storytelling. And I had no idea that the craft of storytelling was so involved. And he poured himself into me. And it started with me, like the modality was the healing. And it was really story as a sense-making tool. It turns out story is a biological sense-making tool. And so for a lot of it for me was, he would have me say the names of guys that I lost, and I couldn't do it. Like I would literally lay on the ground in the fetal position trying to say, names that the Survivors Guild had racked me so bad. And he would have his psychologist, Dr. Joan Rosenberg, right there with us. And eventually I could get to where I could say them. But he kept saying to me, Scott, how are you going to honor these guys? How are you going to share their lessons if you can't say their names? And so over time, incrementally, we worked through that, and I found that I was able to share stories, my backstory, the things that I'd been through, and I loved it, and it was really helping me make sense of things that didn't make sense. And in New York, not long after that, probably I don't know, a year after that, I was in New York at a transition event, and a buddy of mine, James, who was an SF guy, I could tell something was going on with him, and we walked outside in the middle of Manhattan. He told me that he was getting ready to end it, and he had it all set. And I just remember my heart racing and thinking, how in the world, what am I going to do here? And my hands were shaking, and I just blurted it out about the closet. And it was the first time that I had ever said it to anybody. And when I said it, I just felt like crap. I felt like I was going to throw up in my mouth, but I realized that when I said that, he was staring at me all of a sudden. That distant stare was gone. He was like locked in on me. And he said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, that happened. You're not the only one going through this, bro." And he's like, "I had no idea." And we just started talking. And the next thing you know, we had been talking for hours, and we ended up getting supper. And you know what? He's still here. He's still, in fact, he's working in the anti counter suicide space as a leader of a nonprofit now. And that was the most embarrassing, humiliating moment of my life, and the same way that I located myself in Bo's story, he had located himself in mine. And it started to kind of open up to me in a way that I'd never realized, that this idea that my struggle had become an asset in that moment, in real time, in a moment that was a very high stakes moment. And that's when storytelling for me really took on a whole new level. And it was no longer a modality for self-healing. I was no longer the beneficiary. I was able to actually repurpose my stories into ways that helped other people. And I thought, okay, if that worked there, could I do that at scale? Could I teach other people to do that? What is actually going on with this? And so I just, like any good Green Beret, I just started obsessing over storytelling. I mean, like, I went all in. I did a TED Talk, and then I did another TED Talk, and then I did another TED Talk. I studied under Bo Eason, Pat Quinn, Michael Haig. I studied under 3 indigenous storytellers. Anything that, what I committed to is like, whatever, what Tim Ferriss is to high performance, I'm going to be to storytelling. Like, anything that scared me, I just went and did it. News broadcasts, I'd never done it in my life. I was terrible at it the first couple of times, but I thought I should learn how to do that. Podcasts. And then to complete my midlife crisis, I wrote a play and started studying acting at age 50. And all of those things conspired to create, I don't know, this way of thinking about storytelling that I call the generosity of scars. This idea that we can take our struggles, our scars, and we can repurpose them through stories that serve other people, which is what all of you have done, right? And it turns out, and then I'll end on this, Sara, and we can go wherever you'd like. But the reason that I wrote The Generosity of Scars is because I've been doing this for 15 years now, and a lot of you on this call, I've worked with you. And the stories that are immense trauma, immense grief. What Pert did not tell you about being a combat veteran is that she was blown 500 feet from an armored personnel carrier and cut in half. Her lower half is mostly metal, right? And, she didn't share that with you, right? But like, that's her, those are literally some of her scars. But her story is one of resolution, right? Just like every single one of you. And what I learned in this deep work and working with people like you is that there's this miracle that happens with storytelling. And this is why y'all's community, our community, is so important. And here's the miracle of it. We've been telling stories for 100,000 years. Storytelling is the oldest and most effective modality for communication in the world. There's nothing that's even a close second. And the reason is this, because the brain has a mandate to make sense of the world. And the way it does it is it tells itself a story. It works in metaphor and pattern. And it has been doing that for 100,000 years, right? So if I walk into the fire pit 10,000 years ago and I'm like, let me tell y'all why saber-toothed tigers make crappy pets, and I'm all bloodied up, you're going to listen like your life depends on it, because it does. And the reason that our brain uses story to make sense of things is it goes from struggle to resolution, from wounds to wisdom, right? That's the way the brain works. And if you're generous enough to take your struggle, your scar, and share it through story in the service of the audience, what happens is the minute you start talking about struggle, the audience locates themselves in your story. And they go through what's called narrative transportation. They are literally transported into your story. And then the second miracle occurs, which is called autobiographical listening. I'm now listening to your story, but I'm processing my own lived experience in the safety of your narrative, right? So my dad's battle with cancer becomes your sister's battle with cancer, or your battle with cancer, or, oh crap, I hope I don't get cancer, right? But every single person in the audience is now processing their lived experience autobiographically as you tell your story, right? It's not even about you anymore. Like, they're literally making meaning out of their own life because of your generosity. And it's a formula that's been in place for 100,000 years, and you all have figured it out. Like, that's what this community does. And so I believe it is the ultimate antibody to the isolation that we have, to the churn that's out there, to so many of the social ills that we're dealing with. It is a modality for healing, yes, but that's just the beginning, right? That's just the beginning. As storytellers, we can go from the modality of healing, where we're the beneficiary and the audience is our helper, to a complete pivot into resolution, where we become the helper and the audience becomes the beneficiary. You know, Holly went from coming to see Last Out in 2019 and being a wreck because she lost her son Danny on the same battlefield that my character played, to standing in the red circle and giving a TED talk as a Gold Star mom with the same story: wound to wisdom, scar to resolution. And so that's my body of work. That's my life. And so I am at your disposal to talk about this however you'd like. I hope that wasn't too long, but I wanted to kind of give you a sense of the journey, but also, you know, the craft, because it's something that is y'all are doing, and I want to give you every opportunity to do it at the highest level possible. So fire away.
Scott, you are, I call you the king of storytelling, and I'm saying it again. I'm just adjusting my screen here. Thank you for being so generous with your scars. Thank you for showing being such a compass in this arena, and just sharing so deeply, and how you articulate things so clearly. It is just, I always feel like I am being given a big gift, and I'm so honored to be able to help gather these people to hear everything that you've learned and you've grown in, and that you have been willing to do to share your stories. Um, Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, Troy, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so Scott, appreciate you sharing and thanks for everybody's individual participation coming out of the woodworks every so often. But um, as you mentioned, Scott, everybody here has a phenomenal story, but sometimes we don't necessarily acknowledge our capacity to like our own individual greatness because we compare ourselves to others. It's, somebody's a combat veteran or they deployed or whatever the scenario is. So what's your thought to for the sake of encouraging others, knowing that we all have great stories, but how do we overcome that? Hey, I'm not good and I'm not worthy.
It's a great question, Troy. And you know, here's the three biggest storytelling lies that resistance tells us. Ready? The resistance with a capital R. I don't have a story. Nobody wants to hear my story, and my story's not as good as hers. Like, those are the three biggest lies that resistance will tell you about storytelling. So the first thing I will tell you is, the second that you start to think that, that is probably the thing. What you should do is the opposite in that moment. Like, you should do if you're thinking I don't have a story, the truth is you don't only have one story. The brain works in metaphor. You have tens of thousands of stories, right? We have so many stories. And when you start thinking specifically to what you said, Troy, about comparison, and this is something that we do a lot, and unfortunately, the modern world that we live in foments comparison like this in a way that's really unhelpful. But there's a rule in storytelling. Actually, psychologist Dr. Carl Rogers actually came up with it. Bo would say it from time to time as well. But it's a rule that we can all live by as storytellers. What's personal is universal. What's personal is universal. If it's personal to you, then it's going to have universality and universal value to the audience. Period. Right? That's the beauty of storytelling. If you think about it, those are the stories when we typically are drawn to the storyteller, is when they are personal. But if you think about the world that we all grow up in, is like, no, that's personal, or that's just business, right? But the reality is that's not how humans function. Humans are social creatures, right? We choose the storyteller before we ever choose the idea. We always choose the teller first, and we're never going to choose the teller in a trust depleted environment if it's not a personal connection. So what I tell people is, the general rule is, if it's personal to you, it'll matter, right? If it's not personal to you, then the phones are going to be out.
That's good. Yeah, thank
Appreciate it,
you.
Scott. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, you bet.
Janet.
Hey, Scott.
Hey,
As
buddy.
soon as I saw you're going to be talking, boy, I had to be on here. And
Thank you. That's
I
sweet.
want to say that is perfect timing. I'm going on a women's retreat of first responders this weekend. I have not met any of them, and it's off the grid. And so it's supposed to rain all weekend, and we're in tents. So it should be interesting. Some good stories. I'm taking Bailey's with me to have with our coffee. That should help. But the one thing that I've started doing is for silent auctions, I've been starting to take books, and I'm taking Wounds to Wisdom and then my book uh, and packaging it up as a silent auction for these ladies. And when you talked about worthy, I said to a shaman one time, I says, because in 2020, I wasn't going to do anything again. I wasn't going to do any speaking. I was done. And I said, I feel like I'm being pushed to do this. And she says, what if you thought it was a magnet and you're being drawn to it? And people show up, right? You show up, Holly shows up, Sara showed up in 2020, Chris Gregorio, like I've met Sara now. I haven't met Holly. I met Michelle and Chris Gregorio. It was oh so wonderful to meet him. And I am hoping someday that I'll end up with seeing one of your shows. I saw Bo Easton in 2012 at an event where he did his one person talk. He is friggin' amazing and powerful. And I can see why you worked with him, and he's on my list. So thank you so much for coming. And Holly, thanks for being the beautiful person you are, and you too, Sara and Michelle. Like, I love you all. Thank you.
Janet, I hope your retreat's awesome. Yeah, I hope it's awesome. One of the things I'll just say this real quick I think that for us as protectors, one of the things that I encourage a lot are storytelling, creating storytelling opportunities in the natural world around fire. The more we can do that, the better. Anyone who's ever come to one of my events, and there's several on here like Holly and Perk and that have, I will tell you that, and this is with our families too. There's something really primal about storytelling around a fire that changes our chemistry and accelerates trust, promotes meaning and understanding in healing. And so whatever opportunities you can create or make, you don't need a title to do this. The more we can get out into the natural world and tell stories around fires, it is a true antibody to the churn, and to the things that we're facing out there. So I'm glad you're doing it, and I think that with the mental health tsunami that we seem to have in the first responder, military family, and military communities, we're going to have to do more of this. These are the kind of peer-to-peer things I think that we can do in our own communities. And fire and natural world and story are at the intersection of healing and connection for sure. So glad you're doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Chris.
Scott, brother, thank you. I always enjoy hearing you speak.
Hey, buddy.
Question for you. For those of us that are very impact driven and need to feel like we're having an impact when you're telling your story, especially at the very beginning, and you don't see that, because oftentimes when we have that impact, you might not ever know it, but if you do know it, it's probably a ways down the line. What is your best advice to fuel people to keep telling their story and to keep pushing that until they get that?
Yeah, what I tell people, and I talk about this in the generosity of scars, is one thing is to maybe think about living the life of a storyteller, right? It's one thing to tell a story. It's another thing to live the life of a storyteller. What I mean by that is I think storytellers just navigate the world in kind of a different way, Chris. And it's accessible to all of us. It's a little bit of a mindset shift. But for example, what I tell folks is, the difference between a storyteller and a speaker is up there for themselves. A storyteller is up there for the audience. And that's a massive difference. And if you don't believe me, the next time you go to an event where people are speaking one to many, watch through that lens and you will clearly see who the speakers are and who the storytellers are. You will see who's up there for themselves and who is up there for the audience. A storyteller is going to spend a radically larger amount of time in preparation than a speaker, right? A speaker is going to think, I got this. Yeah, I'm good. A storyteller is going to obsess over the pictures in the head of their audience all the time, right? I'm going to be, I don't want you to obsess over, oh man, I hope I don't blow it up there. Or, oh man, I hope I don't, fail. What I want you to obsess over is, what are the pictures in the head of my audience right now? What's their goals? What's their pain? What's their pain? What's their goals? What's their goals? What's their pain? Like, I want to be thinking about that literally from the time I get tapped on the shoulder that I'm going to tell a story or I'm going to talk to them until I walk out on that stage or whatever the podcast is or whatever it is. Because if you do that, the audience will automatically know you're there for them. And then whatever stories you tell, it's not even about you. Even if you're the protagonist, you're telling it for them. And so what I would say in that, Chris, what that does, man, is it takes all the pressure off, right? It's not performative anymore. It's for them, right? So everything you're doing is in the service of them. And it translates. It does. It really does. Now, you still have to train and prepare, but that's what I tell people is to really think about telling stories are told in the service of the audience, and storytellers serve their audience. And if you go about it that way, and that's really what Generosity of Scars is all about, is how to manage your energy like that before, during, and after you tell the stories, and how to design and deliver stories that help you do it. So I hope that helps, but that's how I try to come at it.
Thank you, my friend.
You bet.
Beautiful. Thank you. And then Jim?
Yeah, so I was one of those resistance guys.
Yeah.
When Sara hit me up about the book, and every one of them, and it wasn't until I really dug into what I was going to write and figured out that I realized that there was something that would help somebody else, and that was the key. And so since then, being able to expand my story, from the small chapter and touch on many of the other aspects that impacted me through the journey, has allowed me to see the impact that I can have on other people more. Most recently, as Sara knows, the thing I came to realize is that the story's not over.
That's right.
There are things that happen that you need to be able to bring into the story. And my story is all about elasticity and an unwillingness to give up when facing challenges. And so my most recent one, was pretty significant. And I approached that the same way I approached the other scars from the years before, and, got past it, and now able to tell that story about what that means. And so being able to get over that resistance is the biggest hurdle. But once you get there, I think that's where you're going to land in a good spot.
It's so good, Jim. And I appreciate you saying that. And, look at the people that are here because of their trust in you and the connection that they have with you. Like, and that's the power of being a storyteller, is that you're able to open doors for other people and help them step through them. The thing about resistance is this, and you guys, and I hope that you'll really take this to heart. But the thing about resistance is that it's just energy. Humans are mostly energy. And so resistance is just energy. It's just energy because it matters, because what you're about to do matters. But it's also because we're social creatures and we don't have fur, fangs, or claws, right? And the way that we're at the top of the food chain is that we form teams and groups better than any other creature on the planet. So we don't want to get voted off the island, right? So what happens is we experience a semi-conscious or unconscious biological reaction to being in front of other humans that is primal. For many people, it approximates the same physicality of a gunfight or running into a burning building, right? The same heart palpitations, the same sweats. I still to this day have very severe resistance, very severe anxiety. and before I go on stage. And the reality is, it's energy. And so, what I want to try to get across to everybody is this: that's the way that's going to show up for you is going to be tension in the body. Okay, because storytelling is an embodied act. If you're in your head, you're not going to reach people. It's when you're in your body. It's when the story is, it's a physical act. And so, at least oral storytelling. And if you have tension in the body and you don't tend to that tension, then you brace and you look like you don't trust yourself. And then it's going to be very hard for the audience to trust you because they're going to be worried about you. Right? So the best way to metabolize tension in the body is really solid preparation. Really solid preparation. Diaphragmatic breathing. If you just do 3 belly breaths, and then let's just do it together. All right. So everybody just sit up, put your right hand on your belly and your left hand on your chest. And what we're going to do is on the inhale, we're going to breathe through our mouth and we're going to expand our belly into our right hand. And then we're going to squeeze belly to spine on the exhale like a balloon. So I'll watch me. It looks like this. All right. So we're going to do 3 of those with our eyes closed. Ready? Expand on the inhale. Should be horizontal. Squeeze belly to spine. Feel your feet on the floor as you do it. Expand. Hold it. Squeeze belly to spine. And then one more. Expand. Squeeze belly to spine. And now very slowly, we're going to say out loud 3 times. Don't say it yet. With our eyes closed. I have time. Okay, ready? Here we go. I have time. Again. I have time. One more time. I have time. And then you just open your eyes very slowly. Notice 3 new things in the room that you didn't notice before. That's called ocular focus. That will drop you in. And then just walk in the room and do what you're going to do. Like if you'll just do those things, 3 diaphragmatic breaths, 3 I have times, and then focus on 3 new things before you walk in the room, you will be in a parasympathetic state. You'll be in calm and connect when you walk in, and you won't be in your head. You'll be in your body. But that's honestly, that's how resistance shows up, as tension. And so we can all metabolize tension. Anytime you're going to get on a high stakes call with a client or a Zoom call or walk on, you got to tell your story, just do that. And 9 times out of 10, you'll be in a good state when you connect, and you'll be embodied, and the audience will be able to connect with you very quickly. I know that was really long, but I was wanting to show you guys that before.
It's great. Thank you. Richard.
Okay. So a lot of what you said resonated. The 2 big things you talked about were relevance and being able to say their name. 15 years as a frogman of 5 deployments and a couple years as an instructor at the end, and then 24 as a firefighter. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Acts of Valor, but there was a letter the guy wrote to his kid, and there's a quote in there that resonates so much with door kickers that have been out there. And it said, the one thing I fear about growing old is that grown men will no longer fear me. And the relevance of what we used to do versus what we're capable of now has haunted me for years. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were at the restaurant at the beach, and these young kids were jogging by and walking. And I remember looking at her and saying, damn it, I used to be somebody. And now I'm just a broken down war horse. And processing that's really hard. What's my relevance now? And I know that it's impact of how I can help other men, but thinking about going from a warrior to a was is hard sometimes. And for people on here that know me, they always see me as a strong guy, and not many people hit my vulnerability button. Wow. Like you did today. And then the other thing was saying their name. And June's really hard for me. Um, Operation Red Wing, the biggest loss of SEAL team in the history of the community. It was the movie Lone Survivor was made after that. And one of the guys that died in the movie I deployed with, another guy that died on the helicopter I deployed with. And Marcus Luttrell I put through training, and Mike Murphy I put through training. So it's a movie to a lot, but it's not a movie to me. And it's hard. So I've only ever done this once. Wow. But I'm going to try again because June 28th was the anniversary of all this. So I'm just going to try and read names of those that were lost. Matt Axelson, Danny Dietz, James Fontan, Shamus Goyer, Corey Goodnature, Dan Healy, good friend of mine, Kip Jacoby, Eric Christensen, Jeff Lucas, Michael McGreevy, Marcus Morales, Mike Murphy, Shane Penn, James Ponder, Stephen Reich, Michael Russell, Chris Scherenbach, James Sue, and Jeffrey Taylor. I thank you and I hate you for hitting that button today, but it needed to be hit today. So thanks, Scott. And thanks for the space, everybody.
Yeah, it's my honor, Richard. And no, thank you, man, and for honoring those boys. And all I can tell you is this is like what you just did is, there's another level to you now as a storyteller. And the thing that and I get the war horse thing too, I really do. But the thing is that um, the miles that you've run and the scars that you've accumulated are indeed the greatest asset we have. Like, I really truly believe that in so many ways, and I see it over and over again. And it's the one thing that will hold a room. It's the one thing that will make young people forget they own a cell phone. I just did a similar thing that you just did up at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and I talked to a group of kids, college kids, about Afghanistan. They weren't even alive on 9/11. And I shared the names of some of my buddies that fell, and I told their stories. And you know what, man? I talked for 90 minutes and there wasn't a damn phone out in the room, not one. And I, and my point is, like, this is available to all of us. And so, like, what you just did, my prayer for you and my hope for you is that, like, it's a new threshold for you, and that now you can say those names more often. And you know what? Even times when you say them, you laugh and you smile and you think of and you tell stories, and because that's when something really special starts to happen. And I think it comes from another place, but I think I just appreciate you sharing that with me. It means a lot, and I'm glad, and I hope we stay in touch.
Love you, Richard. Thank you for your generosity. Yeah.
Thanks for the space.
David?
Wow. Anything that I was thinking of and wanted to speak about seems incredibly insignificant at this moment.
So Richard, wow. So thank you for doing that. Number one, for them. Number two, for you. I think that that is a breakthrough moment for you that can't go unrecognized, and how special that was, not only for them and honoring in their blessed memory, but for you to take that step forward in this space where you can now gain the confidence to do it again somewhere else. So I wanted to recognize that, how special the moment is for you as well, and don't take that for granted. Um, I'm not quite sure how to transition, but I'm gonna do the best. Scott, thank you for always being a friend to this platform and to me personally, and some of the conversations that we've exchanged over the past. I appreciate them always. One of the things that you had said, and you answered to Chris's question, is there's a huge and significant difference between a storyteller and a speaker. And that it's something that I've kind of been battling in my own head for some time, when there's a lot of what I call podium lizards in this business that have taken advantage of the mental health industrial complex that has been created. And I really struggle with that, because I think there's certain people that are doing more harm than good. And I don't know that they recognize it. And if they do, shame on them for continuing to move forward. And if they don't, shame on them for their ignorance. Uh, but either way, I think it's really challenging for me. And one of the reasons that I'm challenged by it, and I ended up going back to school to get my graduate degree in this positive psychology space, and my thesis was in the narrative science and positive humanities, and the power of storytelling uh, as a modality and a tool. One of the towards law enforcement healing specifically. So one of the things that I've struggled with these folks that I have described is they seem to vomit their story at a podium rather than tell their story at the podium. And they don't leave the audience with a tool to walk away with when they are in the spirit of narrative transportation and um, in that healing process. I've heard people feeling worse walking out of a presentation than when they walked in. And clearly that's not your space, because you're a freaking master at this thing. And I really appreciate always learning from you. What is your take on providing a tool at the end of a storytelling session, or eh, what do you suggest having people walk away with after they've taken that journey with you and connected in some way or another? But now that they're going to walk out of that room and go off onto their own, hearing and connecting with you in your journey, and they have to come back to reality at some point. How do you recommend making that connection for them long term? Is there a tool that you'd like to share with them as a takeaway? Or what's your thoughts on all that? I know that was kind of long-winded.
No, it wasn't at all, David. I mean, I appreciate it's very thoughtful and it's a great question. And I've seen the same thing. And so I'll answer a couple of tools, I would say. Well, first of all, I think for all of us as storytellers, and all of you on here have been through your own experiences with trauma and grief and those things. And frankly, you know, the thing that I think all of us need to remember, I try to remember this, is that protectors do not have the market cornered on trauma or grief, right? In fact, what I love about storytelling and narrative competence, or the use of purposeful storytelling in real time, is that if we spend 2/3 of our engagements actually asking questions that let the other party respond in story, we'll learn very quickly that there's a lot of trauma and grief and struggle out there that can unify us, and we can locate each other in those moments. It's amazing. Um, However, when you're speaking from the stage or you're speaking one to many, I think that we do have a responsibility as storytellers that you should not, when you're up there on the platform, whatever the platform is, you should not be the beneficiary of the story. You should be the helper. The audience should be the beneficiary. Doug Lippman says that there's two participants in a story, and there have been since time immortal. There's the beneficiary and there's the helper. So like when Holly first told her story of losing Danny, she was the beneficiary. And Doc Diego and myself, we sat right there leaning in, and we were the helpers. When Richard just did what he did, right? He was the beneficiary in that moment, and you all did exactly what storytellers do. You were the helpers in that moment. You were the audience, but you were the helpers, right? And what I found, David, is that if we keep repping the work like I encouraged Richard to do, and like I've encouraged Holly to do, and Perk and Melissa, if you keep repping the story, and again, it has to go from struggle to resolution. It can't just be struggle. You have to move through the all is lost moment into resolution. If you keep repping that and you get it into your body, at some point, and I don't know when it is, I think it's a God thing. At some point, we are gifted a shift. And the modality goes from beneficiary to helper.
Mm-hmm.
And we are now in a position to do what Holly did, which is to stand on a stage and tell the same story, but now in the service of the audience, right? And so now people can locate themselves in the story. And while she's talking about Danny, they're thinking about something that they need in that moment, right? And that's the beauty of this. So that's the first thing I would say is make sure that your story goes from struggle to resolution. Second, if you're going to tell a story, a scar story, I think that there's really 3 levels that we have to consider. There are wounds, scabs, and scars, right? Metaphorically. A wound is open. It's still, it's very much unhealed. It's vulnerable. And I don't think a wound in that moment is fit for public consumption. I don't think a storyteller should talk about a wound publicly unless it's like serious therapy, you should talk about it to a therapist or a professional with the idea that someday it will serve, right? And it will help you make sense of the world, and it will serve down the road. A scab is a wound that's just superficially healed over, but it could break open. So if our trauma or our grief or our struggle is a scab, and you're still working through it in therapy or whatever, but if you tell it's like it has the risk of being white hot to the touch. Nope, not ready yet. Keep working it. But when it becomes a scar, when it becomes a scar, in other words, when it is resolved in your body, in your mind, and in your spirit, it's ready for service. Right now, you saw, Richard, how you were emotional, right? You were emotional. Emotional access is not the same as a traumatic response. And the problem is we've all been conditioned by pushing this crap down that if we have an emotional response, that's not a good thing. But in reality, it is absolutely totally appropriate. Totally appropriate. What you just did, Richard, embodies leadership, right? Like people have more confidence now and a better sense of you in that moment because of your relatability. And then the final thing I would say, David, is when it comes to the tool, here's what I found that works really, really great. When you go from struggle to resolution, when you get to the resolution part, remember that this is a lived experience. It's over. That part, you're not reliving trauma. You are being generous with your scar in the service of the audience. And if you see it, they'll see it. If you feel it, they'll feel it. And so you're being that's generous, right? But what we want to land on at the end in the resolution are 3 things. What happened? How did I change? And here's what I learned. If you just do that, and to Jim's point, where Jim said, hell, I'm still living this thing. You know what? I think that's awesome because what you can do, Jim, and Holly does this brilliantly, Perk does it all the time, is she says, here's what I know right now. I'm still living this. I'm still in it, but here's what I know right now. Here's what I know in this moment. And that's absolutely resolution. And so because we're getting a sense of what you've learned up to this point. So resolution, as long as you land on, to me, how you changed and what you learned, you could have failed epically. It could be an epic fail. Like it could be the most embarrassing, terrible failure of your life. If you have the generosity to share with us how you changed and what you learned, we will run through walls for you. And we will find value in it. It's not whether you succeeded or failed. It has not a damn thing to do with it. It's how did you change and what did you learn? That's resolution, right? That's what the world needs. But the only way we're going to take it is if you start with the struggle. If you start, from the scar and you work your way up to the wisdom. Like no one wants to hear wisdom from the podium. We're done with it. We're over it. We're over it. It's unwatchable. 5 ways to be great like me, it's unwatchable, right? But if you get up there and you talk about how you got your butt kicked and how you changed and what you learned along the way, we can't look away from you. So I know that was really long, but it's such a good question, and I think that will keep you right down the middle where you want to be.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And just so grateful to have you join us and for sharing not only your scars, but your wisdom as well from the journey. And thank you for always being generous on both of those.
Thank you, man. And hey, the flag you gave me still hangs in my remote delivery platform. Every time I teach from the stage, man, it's right behind me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
That was so awesome. Thank you. I'm going to shut off the recording after Holly to give other people a chance to chime in. Okay. So Holly.
Richard, I just want to, as a Gold Star mother whose son was killed in action, there aren't words to tell you how important what you did is on behalf of the mothers of every one of those young people that you said their names. And as Scott said early, the night he met me, I was a wreck. I was such a wreck that I couldn't say my own son's name. And I forgot that, Scott, until your book, until I read where you remembered it in the book. It's been 7 years. I totally forgot that. But when I read it again, how hard it was for me to say Daniel's name, Danny, my son Danny, which now I say constantly. But that night, I remember the first time I saw the video of Kevin interviewing me after the play. And I saw that and I was shocked watching it then back, how hard it was for me to say my son. Even just saying the word son was painful, so painful. But that's the power of storytelling, because now I can't tell enough about Daniel. I can't stop talking about him and sharing what a beautiful, beautiful boy lived and how he lived and what a blessing he was to me and so many others. And Richard, while you were saying those names too, I was thinking about one of the things that I share in one of my stories. And it's too bad Stephanie had to leave. She forgot to mention that her dad is a retired Air Force captain who's an author. And I quote his book in one of my stories where he talks about how we name buildings and highways and bridges and parks after heroes. And unfortunately, since most people aren't familiar with those names, we tend to, not think of them as real people who lived real lives like my Danny and left behind real families like mine. And so, everyone here is familiar with the old saying, a man dies twice. The first time is when he takes his last breath in this world. And the second time is the last time his name is spoken out loud. But Scott has added a third death. Only Scott would add a third death, but it's very powerful. And that's the last time a man's story is told. And so in the talk when I share this, I encourage people to adopt a practice that I've adopted. And now all my grandkids do it all the time. kind of drive people crazy in the cars too with their friends, they even said, is every time you see, if you're walking into a building named after someone or driving down the highway and you see a sign that says so-and-so Memorial Highway, whoever you're with, whatever you're doing, whatever you're saying, pause and say that name. Just say it. And then now, because of the third death, I make a note, mental note, and I go home and I Google that name and read their story. And then you remember them. So, Richard, thank you from the bottom of my forever broken heart. On behalf of all of those mothers, I really appreciate what you did tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so hard to remember because it puts you there. You know, I remember holding one of my best friends, Mark, in my arms while he died. And as the medic, what the heck? You're supposed to be the one, right? But I firmly believe that they're only gone. They're only forgotten when we forget. They're only gone when we forget. So, you know, we have to keep remembering them to honor them. And you can remember them with their names or with our actions, you know, and that's what I try to do every single day. I mean, I've lost 9 people to suicide in the last 4 years. Completely different story. But yeah, it's this life of service can be so traumatic, and everyone on here understands that, you know, and it can be brutal. So, you know, thank you, Holly, and for everyone on here. You know, on June 28th, have a cup of tea, have a non-alcoholic beer, have a cocktail. I don't care. But on June 28th, just take a minute and just remember, you know, they're there. And they gave everything so what we can have. And it's not just June 28th, it's your son, it's everyone on here. It's so many, you know, and we just got to always remember and be grateful. So, Holly, I'm forever grateful for what you have endured and suffered and lost through your son. And I am forever grateful for what your son gave and what you did for us. You know, heroes have their names on the front of their shirt, not the back of their shirt. And that's your son. And I love him for what he gave.
You know, Richard, that's really beautiful. And Sarah, if I could, I'll just share this. This is from Tim O'Brien. If you've ever read The Things They Carried, he also did a one-man play. But it's a movie about the Vietnam and a book about the Vietnam War. But at the back of the book, this is what Tim says about remembering, and I just think this is so appropriate for this group of protectors. But this is what Tim says about stories and remembering. To Holly's point about overpasses and bridges, stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity, when memory is erased, when there's nothing to remember except the story. And I think that's one of the real honors that we get in our calling as protectors, and as we leave the service and whatever it is that we did before, we get to be the storytellers. We get to be the keepers of those narratives. And what a sacred thing, honestly, if you think about it. What a sacred thing. What an amazing responsibility and honor. But it's a craft, and you can't wing it. You got to train on it. You got to work at it. And it's hard, and it requires generosity. It requires all of us giving all of ourselves to the story and the people we serve. That's what I mean by generosity, you know. And we have to prove every time that we can do that, and it's hard. We have to, you know, it doubles us over sometimes, and we find ourselves losing our breath and wondering if we hold it together. And guess what? If we don't, who cares? The reality is, can you give all of yourself to the story, and can you give all of yourself to the people that story serves? And if you can, there's just a special thing that's going to happen every time. I guarantee it.
Well, Scott, I just want to thank you again just for coming on. This was it was such a rich conversation. There was so much to glean from this, and it's just such an important conversation. It's so healing. The way that you share is so potent. Um, Again, I have learned so much from you. And I think just again, everybody participating, the people that are drawn to what you are doing are some of the most generous people I have ever met in the planet. This is just sacred time to me, and I'm so grateful to you. And I just want to ask, what do you want us to walk away with today?
Um, well, first of all, I've said it several times tonight, is keep going, don't stop. Like your stories are, critical to the world, and it's so easy to talk yourself out of it. But just keep going. And if it feels uncomfortable, I say the two best scar stories in the world that the world needs more than anything else is the second best scar story is the story that you don't want to tell anybody else. And the very best scar story in the world is the one you don't want to tell yourself. Right? That's exactly the story that somebody in the back row, back corner needs to hear. Because it's not about being vulnerable, it's about being relatable. Vulnerability is fine, relatability is what we all need. We need to be able to relate to other humans. And if you just focus on being relatable, vulnerability will come alongside you exactly the way that it needs to. It'll take care of itself, right? And you all showed that tonight. So just keep going with it, and just remember that it's not about you. It's about the other person locating themselves in the story. It's about the audience. Stories are told in the service of the audience. What's personal is universal. If it matters to you, it'll matter to us. And no struggle, no story, right? If you omit struggle from your story, it might feel easier, but the reality is your audience is going to check out, and they might even turn on you in these times of low trust. We just can't, it's just unwatchable. We can't connect to anybody who doesn't leverage struggle. So if, that would be probably the thing I would leave you with, is that the scars that you've been through, the wounds that you have are the gold. I think it was Joseph Campbell in the Hero with a Thousand Faces who really coined the term the hero's journey. He had this quote that I love, and he says that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And, what he's talking about is your struggle, right? What he's talking about is the stuff that scuffed us up that is hard to talk about, uncomfortable to talk about, as Jim alluded to. And it's the very thing that people need. So I just hope that you guys will keep going with that. I am going to put in the chat a 7-day scar story challenge that we filmed, because what we found is when you go through the generosity of scars, like the book, and you go through the 7-step framework, it'll help you not only design and deliver your story, your scar story, but you also need to manage your energy before, during, and after. And so we did a 7-day video that, like, if you just do the video each day, it's free, it'll really help you clarify and execute on it. And it's like tangible. It's got a little course guide that comes with it. But I encourage everybody here to do it, because you'll be surprised at how much it'll tighten your story up, and how much you'll be able to deliver it embodied. It's fully embodied. And when you can do that, that's when people forget they own a cell phone. And that's what we want. That's when we want, because that's when they're ready to listen, and they're processing their own life, and the healing and the meaning is made. So those are a lot of points, but yeah, that's where I'm at. And I appreciate everybody having me on. And I just love this group so much.
That's great. Thank you. And I'll put that in the description on the YouTube recording. So we can have that on the link there so people can find that also who listen to the recording. Um, but Scott, you are gold. Thank you so much for this time, and everybody else, much love to you.